How do you bring your passion, your interests, your hobbies together into a product? Hi, this is Karma Spence, the Own Your Awesome Mentor. And in today's episode, I'm going to be sharing with you the part of my conversation with Dr. Ethan Siegel, where he talks about how he got into science, and then he talks about how he brought his love of science and science fiction together into his new book. So, you are also a scientist. I mean, it's clear you're a science fiction fan. You're also a scientist as well. What got you interested in science?
Like I was telling you earlier, for most people, I think science fiction can serve as a gateway to science for them. But for me, I always remember being curious about that, being a questioning child about how does this work? Why does it work this way? Why is it this much? I remember getting a microscope when I was a kid and being fascinated that there were these tiny little worlds beyond what you could see with your eye. I remember getting a telescope as a kid and being frustrated because I grew up in New York City that really the only thing you could see was the moon. And I was not educated enough to know when the best time or place to look at the moon was. And so I would always break out the telescope to look at the full moon, which is not a good time to look at the moon. It's too bright for your telescope unless you have a filter. So I would say getting into science was something that was innate to me. It was sort of like there are all different types of knowledge about the world. There are historical truths, there are personal truths, there are philosophical truths, but there are scientific truths. And those for me are something that are separate from everything else. That always seemed like it's subjective. You add something of yourself in there. But to do science, all you have to do is ask the universe a question about itself and listen to what it has to say. And no matter who you are or what your background is or even what your biases are, if you're doing that science responsibly, we will all reach that same conclusion. We will all, when we do that experiment, we'll get the same results. We'll be able to follow that logical path and arrive at that same conclusion. If we wiped out all of the scientific knowledge that humanity ever had, but we kept a record of what questions do we ask, how do we ask them, and what equipment do we need to do it. And we did all those experiments all over again, we would arrive at the same exact picture of the universe that we have today. And that's incredible. So for me, the ability of the universe to be understood, to be comprehended, that very fact was just what blew my mind. And so that was what got me into science.
Wow. So you have a book coming out called Trecknology, I think it is?
It is Trecknology. It's about the real life science behind almost all, I'll say 28 of the technologies that are featured in various Star Trek series.
So this is bringing basically two of your passions together. Science fiction, Trek, and science. What inspired you to do that?
You know, there are a whole slew of things that came together. When I was in high school, there was a book that came out called The Physics of Star Trek, written by Lawrence Krauss. And like I said, that was when I was in high school. So this is more than 20 years ago that book came out. But I remember being delighted that someone was trying to put a scientific explanation behind these technologies and to say, well, this is impossible, this is plausible, this is far off in the future. And now to look back on the 30th anniversary of Star Trek: The Next Generation, I started writing this book last year on the 50th anniversary of the original series of Star Trek. And I'm sorry for your fans who that makes them feel a little old, but it happens. So you know, I looked at that and I looked at like, well, where have we come in the last 50 years? How many of these technologies are already here? How many of the technologies that we envisioned have we even surpassed? And how many of them that we thought were impossible, even technologies that we thought were impossible when the Next Generation was airing, that we now know may actually be possible? It's incredible how many advances have happened and how many of these technologies technologies are, I'll say, not only on their way, but some of them are already here.
Right.
In the original Star Trek, they didn't envision replicators. All they envisioned was like, oh, like I guess we can replicate some food. By the time the Next Generation came around, they were like, no, we can replicate anything. Like we have a replicator and any piece of equipment you want, any custom made thing, a musical instrument, a cup of Earl Grey tea, whatever you want, we can replicate it. And today, we have 3D printers. We have 3D printers that are good enough that if you provide them with the right feedstock, they can construct things out of metal, out of plastic, out of wood. You can even make them out of some organic materials. And even they have some 3D printers that if you load them up with foodstuffs, you can 3D print food from hamburgers to pizza, which is pretty incredible. So I looked at this and I said, well, how good are these 3D printers? And the best ones can get you accurate shapes of things down to about 20 nanometer accuracy, which is incredible. I want to say that's about 50 times finer than a human hair. So really, really incredible stuff. And that's just one technology. That's just one example. So when we take a look at all the others, yes, there are a ton where we've just come such a long way. Geordi's visor that gave him sight, we can go even beyond that. We have these implants that we can put directly into people's visual cortexes in their brain, and we can wirelessly feed them signals to give them sight. It's estimated that if we can get this technology to market, it can restore vision in up to 85% of blind people.
Wow. That is amazing.
Yeah. And we have some technologies that you don't even think of as being from Star Trek, right? You break out your tablet computer or your smartphone and you're like, oh yeah, but I guess Star Trek The Next Generation invented that with pads, or even on the original series where they had the electronic clipboard. You pull out your little flash drive and you think, oh, I guess Star Trek had those isolinear chips. You pull out your Skype Translate or your Google Translate and you can listen in real time to a foreign language speaker, have their speech translated in real time in audible speech into your ear. Is that a universal translator? You can talk about all sorts of
one.
Yeah, it's not only the beginnings of one. I mean, you have to remember part of what happened on the original series, and I know you weren't a fan of Enterprise, but back on Enterprise, the communications officer had to be an expert in languages. Because they didn't have a universal translator that was that good. And now, just a few years later, right, Enterprise only went off the air 12 years ago. 12 years later, we have that technology. We have automatic sliding doors that we don't even think about as being an advanced technology. You walk into a supermarket or an airport and the automatic sliding doors let you in. We had the Tricorder X Prize sponsored by Qualcomm, and lo and behold, they awarded that X Prize just in this past calendar year. They awarded the prize because in a 5-pound device, they made something that was capable of monitoring 12 different biological functions to look for illness and disease and general health. And yeah, we can do this. We can do this. So there are a huge number of technologies that Star Trek envisioned that are already here, to say nothing of the original flip phone communicators.
Which, of course, is the one that most people think of.
Right.
The only difference is that when he flipped it open, he'd dial it this way rather than going like this.
Yeah, that he needed an analog dial like he was playing a Marble Madness or Arkanoid or something, you know? Pong, one of those Pong controllers.
Oh, I remember Pong. I had Pong. Yeah. It's amazing what entertained us at one time.
Hey, mister, I like Pong.
I don't know, it got a little old. Pong.
Yeah. Yeah, well, having to wait was no fun.
Yeah, very. So, you're taking your passions and you're turning them into income with this book.
Yes.
What kind of advice would you have for people who want to start turning their hobbies and interests and passions into some form of income, whether it be a book or something else? We'll get to the answer to that question in tomorrow's video. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube and give me a comment below. If you have questions for a future video or know someone I should be interviewing for this Ideas to Income segment, please let me know. And remember, don't box yourself in. Spread your wings and fly because you, yes, you are capable of more than you know.